Esther here, filming with a different kind of backdrop, a different setup actually. I mean, it's only taken me, like 7 years to spend $28 on Amazon to get a standing tripod that allows me to film overhead. Yeah. Okay, so it goes. But I wanted to share tonight a video, and I wanted to use this backdrop. This is a beloved possession of mine, this backdrop. If you're, you haven't seen it in my videos, but if you're in the Mindful Tarot Facebook community, and by the way, if you're not, please join us. Just find us on Facebook or drop me an email at the address below in the description. Join the community. It's such a beautiful group of people, just so warm-hearted and sincere and, super interesting and engaged, all the great stuff. Anyway, I often use this backdrop when I'm posting images of my daily spreads. It is a possession that, it's been in my life longer than tarot, and that's saying something. It is a trunk, an antique trunk that my dear, dear, dear friend Erica, her mom in high school, gave me this trunk. And I love it. I've carried it across the country, back and forth. It's been with me in every bedroom for a very long time. And I adore it. It's, it's stained and gashed and sort of musty and worn and dirty and lumpy and bumpy. And, it's kind of like me. I love it. Anyway, tonight I wanted to film kind of a follow-up to a video I just made a couple days ago, but really a theme that I've been talking about for a very long time in my insistence that there is only one tarot. We always talk in this community about there being different systems of tarot, that there's the Rider-Waite-Smith or the Crowley-Harris or the Tarot de Marseille. And I've been saying for a while now, no, there's just one tarot. There's one tarot system, really. We might have different lineages, different expressions of tarot. We might have something like my Soul Cards deck, or something like the Claire Goodchild's Antique Anatomy Tarot, or something like Alejandro Rosan's new Tarot des Ambiguïtés, or even a playing card deck, right? These are all expressions of the one tarot, even the playing card deck, expressions of the one tarot, coming from a tradition that has at its inception baked into it at least two. Now I'm arguing, actually there's kind of three, we could maybe talk about three approaches, but for the sake of argument, let's say two approaches baked into it. The original tarot, the tarot that emerges in Renaissance Italy in the 15th century, a tarot that combines two different ways of expressing information on a two-dimensional surface, two different ways of articulating meaning on paper, two different approaches. The two different approaches I'm talking about are, on the one hand, that allegorical approach that we see in the major arcana, and on the other hand, that geometric approach, number arrangement, that we see in the minor arcana. The original tarot deck puts both of those approaches together. And why I said there's, arguably three is because the court cards are kind of an amalgam of the two approaches. They're sort of like the middle point, the meeting point, the synthesis between the allegorical and the geometric. But that's for a later video. For now, let's just say, there's the allegorical, archetypal, and the geometric. There are cards like this, cards that express meaning through an image that is pretty much recognizably unified, that conveys a sense. Just we look at it and we're like, oh, Wheel of Fortune, the archetype of fortune, this allegorical reference to an idea that has a kind of coherence and a history all its own. This is an image of Hercules, but even if we didn't recognize the mythological reference, the archetype here is obvious, that there's something here about power, about strength, about conquering, right? Now this, we modern tarot readers will say, oh, the Hanged Man. But, for an early modern reader, or viewer, they would have seen Judas Iscariot. They would have seen an image of the traitor. But regardless, we see here a kind of sacrifice, a kind of suspension. There is meaning conveyed in this image as such. And then an image like this, we don't even need to be told what it is. Temperance. Now, in every modern facsimile of the Visconti Sforza, this happens to be the 1980s US Games edition, there are several cards that are missing. They just didn't survive from the early modern period. And so what publishers tend to do is they tend to get an artist to make those cards, to recreate a card. And in this US Games tradition, in this edition from the 80s, and this is carried forward in more modern US Games editions of this deck, Luigi Scapini, the guy behind the medieval Scapina Tarot, he did the missing cards. So this is one of his cards, the Devil. This is another of his cards, recognizable for us now as the Tower, but we can, regardless, we can see, there's something cataclysmic going on here. The Star, the Moon. All of these cards express that archetypal function of tarot, that archetypal aspect of tarot, right? That way in which meaning is conveyed in kind of storybook images that convey a kind of mythic or mythopoetic significance, right? They're archetypes. They speak in terms of the tarot suits. We might say they speak in terms of the watery cups. They speak right to our gut, right to our soul. Judgment. We have this kind of Apollo-like vision of the sun, that brilliant heaven located deity that's on high, right? The sun, the world, New Jerusalem, really. The vagabond, the fool, this juggler, mountebank figure, this guy who's a bit of a trickster. He's the magician. He's a follower of Hermes. We can't quite trust him. Here he's doing some 3-card Monty, right? This figure of sacred authority, the papist, the female figure, female archetype of sacred authority, female archetype of worldly authority, the empress, male archetype of worldly authority, male archetype of heavenly sacred authority, the pope, this image of eros, of the lover, of that sense of choice and being chosen and choosing, this image of triumph in this chariot, image of justice, Father Time, right? For us, we think the Hermit, but here we're seeing the archetypal origin of the Hermit card in the sense of age and that inward movement of wisdom, of prudence that we see in this hunchback figure. So that archetypal aspect present in the trump cards. And, in a contemporary deck, like this is my Soul Cards deck that I created a few weeks ago using Deborah Kopf-Chapin's Soul Cards. Again, the use of images to convey at a glance a sense of meaning, of a kind of, and this I think is the hallmark of archetype, is that there's a sense of a wholeness that's sort of more than the sum of its parts. There's a kind of unification. That's how it feels like that's what makes it feel like we're dealing with the stuff of myth, with these structures of psychical meaning that carry weight for us. So, I look at a card like this and I say, this is the Tower. It feels like the Tower. It carries the weight of that archetype, the archetype of death. This is, for me, this is the 7 of Wands. And for me, this is the Wheel of Fortune. For me, this is the Queen of Wands, right? All of the different archetypes. Here is a deck that I've constructed that speaks that kind of archetypal side of tarot, right? The way that each card can convey a separate meaning. But, the Visconti Sforza also carries with it cards that look like this, that speak to geometry and number, right? That show us a discrete number of objects in space. The 4 of Swords, the 5 of Swords, the 6 of Swords. Meaning is conveyed here. It's a totally different way in which meaning is conveyed. And if we think about the legacy of that geometric aspect of tarot, and by the way, my dog Sylvie just came upstairs, so you might hear a little doggy noise off in the corner. But if we think about like a modern playing card deck, and this is actually one of my favorite all-time playing card decks. It's a U.S. Games facsimile of an 1864 poker deck. This is a, well, you probably can't read that, but that's the romance card that comes with it. But when we think of this, you know, we see, oh, look, okay, there we have a manipulation of space. And this thing about playing cards I think is so fascinating, that the suit elements are all the same size. And so what's really being expressed is the way number can fill up a geometric pattern. And this relationship between center and periphery, especially center and corners, you know, it really gets at that kind of quincunx or mandala-like aspect of the geometry of this world of cards, this world of tarot, which the modern four suited playing cards it derives from it. The same universe that gives us tarot gives us the playing card deck, right? So center and perimeter, right? Number is foregrounded. Shape is foregrounded, up and down, the way that, you know, in 3 of the 4 suits that we have this distinction between up and down, because the suit elements are not perfectly reversible, unlike the diamonds where they are, right? So we can see at a glance, is the 5 of hearts upside down or right side up, right? That sense of point and roundness, the way in which these cards evoke the geometry that we might relate to a kind of stereotyped notion of gender. Point versus roundness, right? Lingam versus yoni. So this is that kind of geometric aspect of tarot, where we have a world of number and space. And in the modern playing card deck, this is boiled down to its very essence, with nothing to distract. The suit elements are all the same size. A 7 of clubs, right side up or reversed, looks the same as a 7 of hearts in terms of the arrangement of elements in the geometric rectangle that is the card. So asymmetry, symmetry, center, perimeter, right? Corners versus sides. This is what gets expressed in playing cards, the geometry of tarot, as opposed to the archetype of tarot. Now, what's so interesting to me, and this is kind of what I wanted to really bring attention to in today's video. What's really interesting to me is in that world that we associate with the geometry of tarot, it's really a world of pips, right? It's a world that we most profoundly associate with the Marseille tradition. This is Alejandro Rozan's Tarot des Ambiguïtés. This is Claire Goodchild's Antique Anatomy Tarot in the mass market edition. I would love, by the way, I would love a copy of any of the editions of the indie version. If you're looking to trade or sell, reach out to me. It's one of my unicorn decks. It's been hard to come by. A couple have slipped past me. So these are very different decks. This is not a Tarot de Marseille. If you look at Claire Goodchild's discussion of the cards in her guidebook, her descriptions are really very closely aligned to what we would understand to be the Rider-Waite-Smith images and conventional meanings of an average Waite-Smith image. You know, her 7, I'm trying to remember, her 7 of coins, for instance, which looks like this. No, that's the 9, sorry. That's the 8. That's the 7. So her 7 of coins It looks kind of like a Marseille Seven of Coins. If I can find that. Of course, I'm not going to be able to find anything quickly because I didn't think of doing this ahead of time, because I never do. I never do. Here we go. It looks somewhat like a Marseille Seven of Coins, although the characteristic disposition of the Seven of Coins in the Marseille tradition has this like triad at the top and the 4 at the bottom. It conveys that stability of 4 and that kind of pointy insertion of the 3. A modern playing card, say a 7 of diamonds or a 7 of anything, because the modern playing card looks the same. You know, it has carried forward the Marseille tradition in a lot of ways, right? So Claire's deck, it looks a little bit like a Marseille deck, but if you look in her guidebook, the description she has of the 7 of Coins sounds an awful lot like the Waite Smith image, where you have a guy harvesting from standing over his grapevine, waiting for the harvest. And here's what she says: planning and patience come into your life with the arrival of the 7 of Coins. You have planted the seeds of a successful enterprise and now have to wait for those little plants to start poking through the soil. Perseverance is required for the big payoff, etc. Well, that really sounds like a Waite Smith card. So she's not trying to do a Marseille deck per se, but she's doing a pip deck, right? What's interesting to me when I look at both of these decks together is it foregrounds something about that geometrical aspect of tarot that we often do associate with the Marseille tradition, and we definitely associate with pip cards of any nature. What this reveals to me is the way in which this geometric side of the tarot relates to the dynamics and the structure and the very bones of the human body. That there's something about geometry that seems particularly attuned to the structure of the human body, the skeleton, the bones, the sinews, the connecting tissues of the human body. So I think that the Antique Anatomy Tarot just really grabs onto how it is that the human body relates to a tradition that gives us meaning through disposing discrete numbers of objects in a set configuration in space, just like our bones and parts relate to each other and help us find meaning. Alejandro's deck does a similar thing by literalizing parts of the body within the suit elements. Hearts for cups, hands for swords, heads for coins, right? Legs for wands. So I've talked in my last video about Alejandro's deck. I've talked about how it's a deck that really calls upon the language of the 13th trump, of death, of how life and disillusion and growth go together. But I think equally, you know, what I think is at stake for me with the geometry of tarot as it gets expressed in pip cards and pip decks, whether Marseille or not, what I think is true is that what's at stake is the disarticulation and then putting back together of life, of parts of us. When we think about geometry, we think about the ways in which our world is disposed through space and time. The head bone connected to the neck bone, connected to the shoulder bones, and so forth. So, I think that's all I have to say today. I have been holding off on really exploring the Antique Anatomy Tarot. I'm waiting for, as some of you know, I always get bags to go with the decks that I know I'm going to work with, and I'm waiting for my bag to arrive. You know, I also have to say this cardstock makes me sad. So I keep fantasizing that I'm going to end up with a nicer cardstock for this deck. But I may have to make myself some kind of a study version of the deck. But I love it. I love this. And I think what is so powerful about this deck is going to be really diving into the ways in which, as a deck that foregrounds geometry, the way in which its literal references to anatomy help construct the meanings, of the readings it provides. Antique Anatomy Tarot. A deck that's going to help us connect heaven and earth by reminding us of the ways in which our body itself connects parts into wholes. And isn't that kind of what geometry is all about? The ways in which discrete parts come together rationally to create a whole, which is very, very, very different from archetype. In an archetype, we have an image, right? This is my image for the Six of Cups. And just as it is, without me trying to analyze it or put it back together, the wholeness, the gestalt, the fullness of that image, the image as unified, gives me its meaning. But geometry is always about that effort of seeing the interconnection of the parts. You know, we have 10 elixirs here, right? And seeing how the symmetry is shaped of 5 and 5, or these 4 surrounding the 2, and the flowers emerging. We see the symmetries, we see the asymmetries, we see how the parts come together as a whole, right? All right, I think that is, and oh, one last thought. And because we see how the parts come together as a whole, we can look at 2 very similar pips in this deck, and we can see what's different about them. So the difference between the 9 in this suit and the 10 is both expressed in the ways in which we have 3 sets of 3s, and but then we also see that the elixirs themselves are different, right? So we start to think about, oh, love potion, joy, bliss, wish, how does that all relate to the different dreams and loves and passion elixirs here? What is that difference all about? What are the labels? Tell us what has changed. That can help us understand the ways in which the 9, I would say, this 9, you know, it is all about wish and a kind of fulfillment at the level of the individual, but this takes it one step farther toward a kind of transcendent happiness that we could relate to wisdom, calming, dream, harmony, and love, right? So the ways in which the geometry makes us see both similarities and differences, that's part of this kind of approach to tarot that we associate with a pip deck. It's not strictly Marseille. It's not even strictly pip, because we might employ it in a deck that isn't a pip deck, but it's geometric. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Eager for whatever thoughts you might have. And as always, thank you so much for your practice. Take good care.